Number 3 is Ohio State. The national champs will look a lot different next year. There's no doubt. But they're still going to be an elite team. And they still got 2 players specifically that I think could be the 2 best players on each side of the ball in the sport. I think that they've got the best defender in the sport next year in Caleb Downs, and I think they've got the best offensive player in the sport in Jeremiah Smith. Hard to take a huge step back when you've got the best player in the sport on each side of the ball. The defense, however, around Downs is going to look dramatically different. Now, they were able to play a lot of depth. So Downs will have guys that have seen the field, but certainly weren't starters. They have to rebuild up front on the defensive line, which was a huge strength for them this last season. And Downs is going to have to break in some new safeties around him. And the safeties in that 3-safety defense for Jim Knowles was a huge key to their success. Unclear for me at this point if they're going to be able to play the structure which allows Downs to be at his best. Part of the reason that they were so good defensively is that they had so much experience around Downs with Ransom and Hancock out there at safeties that they were able to manipulate their structure at times to allow Downs to be the free player near the line of scrimmage. That was huge for their defensive structure and overall philosophy. Are they going to have that? Probably not, at least early in the year. So that's something to at least pay attention to. Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, and they added the Purdue transfer Max Clare, who I was talking about a little bit earlier. Listen, every single game and every game plan, every week next year has to go through Jeremiah Smith. Has to. They cannot go through periods of the game where he disappears. They cannot do that because they're not going to be quite as dynamic around Smith as what they were this last year with experienced players like Henderson and Judkins and Emeka Ibuka. Now, they're going to be very good players. I'm not saying that these are substantial steps down, but it has to go through Smith, not just for his production, which is going to have to be there, but also his impact on the defense. You've got to use Jeremiah Smith to impact the defense in order to open up other areas for all of those less experienced players on the outside. The offensive line is going to return all that interior. They added the 2 tackles in the portal. They could very well start. They've got a monster game early. The opener against Texas is going to be huge. And yep, you don't see Texas yet on this way too early top 10, so you know exactly where they're headed. They get Penn State at home, road games against Illinois, who I think is going to be very good, probably this year's Indiana, and Washington, and of course they're going to have Michigan. Projected starters up there, probably Julian Sayin. I'm not totally sure. Tevian St. Clair is a really good-looking prospect, and they're going to have quite a battle there for quarterback. James Peoples, the existing running back. They got C.J. Donaldson, a really good player from West Virginia. You got Smith, Carnell Tate, probably Brandon Ennis. You got Max Clare, the tight end, along with Jelani Thurman. So, they're going to be fine, folks. I know a lot of guys are walking out the door, but they're walking out of a building that's loaded with talent. It was the best roster in college football, and not every one of those pieces is walking out the door. The defense will look a lot different, and I can't wait to see what their spring looks like to really get an idea of what that defensive lineup could look like. Number 2, only 2 teams left, okay? Only 2 teams left. At number 2, I'm going Texas. I've got Texas at number 2. It's officially Arch Manning time in Austin. This is so rare in college football, and Steve Sarkisian is going to be the benefactor of an incredible amount of patience from a young player and his family. Now, granted, this family has such a unique perspective and the benefit of seeing everything from MVPs and Super Bowls down to college success. So the urgency from the family is there, yes, but it's not a panicked urgency like you would get with most players and families. So what that has led to is patience. Patience. And Arch Manning sat for a couple of years. Even when some of us thought, he might be the better option, he was able to sit and develop and learn for 2 years under Steve Sarkisian. And now that offense is going to look a little bit different because of his skill set running the football. I'm not saying that they're going to dive into the Vince Young zone read offense of Texas past. No. But I am going to tell you, though, when he can take off and affect the defense scrambling, that's huge. That's huge, and that's something that they did not have with Quinn Ewers. This is a team that continues to build their roster with elite-level recruiting. You know they're going to do well in the transfer portal. The offense is going to look a lot different. The major question I have, this is a big belief in Arch right now, but the major question I have is that their offensive line was so good. Who's going to be up front? They've got to replace 4 of the 5 offensive line starters. That's going to be the most difficult part. Now, they lose Golden and Bond, Gunnar Helm, but Ryan Wingo, he could be a star. He'll be back. They get C.J. Baxter. Remember, they did all of this year without their best running back who got hurt in the offseason. So Baxter being back is going to help an inexperienced offensive line. Let's not forget that in the tool bag for Steve Sarkisian, he was able to produce on the ground with what was an ineffective and young offensive line when Bijan Robinson was at Texas. So that's there, and I don't think it's going to be quite as big of an issue when your quarterback can run, when you've got an elite-level running back. I don't think it's going to be quite as big of an impact losing some of those offensive linemen as maybe some look at. But I look at this Texas team, and I think that they're going to be fantastic. The semifinal rematch in Columbus against Ohio State. They've got to go to Georgia. They've got to go to Florida. Red River. They end with A&M in Austin. Difficult schedule, certainly, but they're going to be right there. I'll be surprised if that's not one of the better teams in the country. And number 1, and this is going to be the number 1 team for the reason that I described before even saying who the team is. There is a clear blueprint in college football that has been now established over the last 2 years. Everything runs in cycles, and right now the cycle is about veteran, experienced players. You got to have them. And it's even more valuable when they come from your own program, when you can bring guys back to your program and they know the drill and they know the culture, and the culture of the team rests in those core players. You've got something special. That's exactly what happened with Michigan 2 years ago, and they won the national championship. Think of all of those experienced older players that came back, could have gone to the National Football League, didn't, and won a national championship because of that. Same thing happened with Ohio State. They all committed to a cause bigger than themselves. Double-digit guys on that team spurred the draft, said, no, I'm not going to go be a professional. I'm not going to go to the National Football League. I'm going to stay here, and I want to achieve something really special. And something similar to that is happening right now in State College. Penn State is going to be my number 1 team in my way too early top 10 for 2025. Penn State has gotten better every single year for the past 3 or 4 years. And James Franklin, their team, man, they had every opportunity to win that game against Notre Dame. They are knocking on the door of a national championship, and now they're bringing all of those key pieces back to their team. This is the blueprint. Everybody thinks that it's about the transfer portal because of Judkins and Will Howard and Caleb Downs, but no, the core of the Ohio State Buckeyes were Buckeyes. There's a reason why they were able to weather the storm of adversity of losing to Oregon and Michigan, their rival, and yet still roll through the playoffs and beat 4 straight top 10 teams, all by double digits. There's a reason. What was the reason? Culture, togetherness, chemistry, whatever you want to call it and however you want to define it, it has to be held with guys that committed there and are Buckeyes or Nittany Lions or Wolverines, or they are there. That's where your culture has to be held, and that's what Penn State is going to have. Drew Aller comes back. Nick Singleton comes back. Katron Allen comes back. Denai Dennis Sutton comes back. You start getting those announcements, and I immediately thought to myself, there's your blueprint. There's your blueprint. Now, are they head and shoulders the best roster in college football like maybe Ohio State was in the offseason last year? No, not quite. And I do think that this is going to be a grind because you could talk me into Penn State at 6. You could talk me into Clemson at 18. Like, college football is in an incredible spot right now. I keep saying this. This is the golden age. I think Penn State, in my way too early, is going to be number 1 for the following reasons. Drew Aller has started 29 games now, so he's going to be one of the more experienced quarterbacks in college football. Singleton and Allen have started together since their freshman year. They're now going to be in their 4th year. 4 of 5 starters on the offensive line are back, and they have depth, so they will be able to run the football to death. Year 2 with Andy Kotelnicki, everything that he learned as first-year offensive coordinator for Penn State and operating with those specific players is going to pay dividends moving forward. They've got to replace Tyler Warren, certainly, but they've got a former 5-star sophomore, Luke Reynolds. He's a pass-catching tight end, and I think he will maybe not replace Tyler Warren, but certainly be a serviceable option. The wide receiver group has held them back drastically. They did not have a catch against Notre Dame in the national semifinal. That can't happen again. So you've got to increase your level of productivity at the wide receiver position. They got, Kyron Hudson. They got Devontae Ross, a deep threat from the Sun Belt. Hudson comes in from USC. Those are upgrades. Trey Wallace and Amari Evans both hit the portal, so they're not going to be there, and they're going to need to upgrade. I think they need to go and grab another wide receiver potentially in the offseason. And then this defense is a question mark. They've got to replace Tom Allen, their defensive coordinator, Abdul Carter, their best player up front, Kobe King, the linebacker, Jalen Reed, KJ Winston, who was hurt most of last year. So that's maybe a little bit neither here nor there. But a huge boost when denied Dennis Sutton, who's going to be one of the best pass rushers in the country, decides to come back. Zane Durant, he passed on the draft as well, so he'll be solid in the middle of that defensive line. The secondary is going to have Zakee Wheatley. He's back. He's going to have a few spots to fill, but what do we know about Penn State defensively? They're always elite, and I know and trust that James Franklin is going to make the right hire because he has continued to make the right hire. You know, you think about now for 3 straight, Brent Pry and then Manny Diaz and then Tom Allen. They have succeeded through a series of different defensive coordinators, and nothing suggests, at least to me, that they're going to take a step back. Penn State, they still have to prove one thing to me, and they didn't get a chance to prove that this year. Even in a run to the national semifinal, they never beat a team that they were even with. That was their big chance against Notre Dame, and they didn't do it. They've got to get over that hump. That's going to be the tipping point for James Franklin and Penn State, is getting over that hump of beating someone that they maybe quote-unquote shouldn't, or that they're on equal footing with. And if they do that, then watch out. They're going to have a huge chance to do that early in the year in the Big Ten opener, as Oregon's going to come to town and be there in State College. They're going to go to Ohio State. That's not going to be an easy one, but home games against Indiana, Nebraska, road game at Iowa. It's a favorable schedule for Penn State. I like a lot of things about the Nittany Lions, and so for those reasons, the Nittany Lions are going to be my number one team in my way too early top 10 for 2025. Thank you for watching the Joel Klatt Show YouTube channel. And if you liked this clip, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel, and you can stay up to date on all of my college football coverage.